Good morning, Wainimi Elementary School District. This is another edition of Teachers Supporting Teachers, and today it's a Collab-o-rama. And the topic today is social and emotional learning in regards to distance learning plans. And so moderating today is Dave Castellano. So good morning, Dave.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to see you all here on this Friday. Again, Liz gets the day off after a busy week doing Collab-o-ramas, and it's great to have our Social Emotional Learning Friday. We're fortunate today to have three excellent teachers who will be sharing kind of what they've been doing with their distance learning plans and how they incorporate social emotional learning in making those connections with students. So I'm very happy that we have Medita Schumann, who teaches 5th grade dual language at Bard. Caitlin Boudreau is a 3rd grade teacher at Haycox Elementary. And Atenea Benitez teaches 6th grade at Blackstock. So please, again, if you have any questions as we go through this presentation, type them in the chat and Helen will be more than happy to share them with all of us. So let's go ahead and get started. And Medita Schumann's going to begin our presentation today. And she will be talking about how to do circles in the classroom. So Medita, why don't you go ahead and begin and let me know when you need me to advance the slides, okay?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, we have been, my partner and I, because I am a dual language teacher, so I'm the Spanish teacher, and then my partner, Monica Aguilar, is the English teacher. And we had started restorative circles shortly after, like in December, with our class. So our class is familiar, with the practice and how it works. And we were also using second step strategies with them and practicing those lessons. So we kind of incorporated the two, we mixed them, and so we decided to continue to use them with our students in our Google Meets. We meet twice a week, and the students, they have just become very comfortable with them, and I think they really like them. They'll remind us, like, are we going to do a restorative circle, or are we going to, so we always try to remember to do that. So some of the circle questions that we will ask, you kind of want to start off with like a little warm up or a fun question, and I put an example there. If you woke up tomorrow as an animal, what animal would you be? And you just start with that fun question just to get everyone talking. And over here on this link that I'll have Dave click on, I found this website of circle questions, and they're even by category. So there's a check-in, there's getting acquainted, storytelling from our lives. So there's a whole list of different kinds of questions that you can choose from. And so again, and sometimes even, on different sessions it'll just be like an easier question, or, maybe sometimes that brings up a student shares, and maybe, it brings up something like, oh, we kind of follow through with another question. And so, yeah, you see there's a bunch of, and then I'll tell you right now on the next slide how there you go. And then, so you start up with kind of the fun question, the warm up. And then there's kind of like a deeper question. And some examples that I have actually used, with my class are share your rose, best part of your day, your thorn, worst part of your day, your bud, what you are excited for. And that just really gets, the students sharing. And sometimes students are going to be very general, like, oh, this or that. And sometimes, a student really needs to talk about, like, oh, my brothers and sisters are just, they're bugging me, or maybe they'll share something. Sometimes we'll say specifically, like the next one, choose a color that best describes how online class is going for you. So I kind of changed that question to make it like an online learning type of thing. And sometimes as they're sharing, they're like, does it have to be about online learning? Could it be about, and of course, share whatever you want. Another thing that we do, because it's a dual language, normally, like if I'm leading it, you know, I'm the Spanish teacher, the students have to respond in Spanish. But whenever we're doing restorative circle, we always allow them to speak in the language that's most comfortable for them, because we never want language or anything to be, you know, like a barrier, or like where I can't truly express myself. I could express myself better in this language. So the language is always up to them, whatever they want to share. And that's, you know, specific to a dual language program. I put another example of a question that was kind of specific to what we were learning. We're reading Shiloh right now. And so this question, you know, and sometimes like I kind of think about it, because, you know, it might bring up some things that, you know, we have to kind of be ready to address. So, you know, it was in our novel, the dog Shiloh is being abused by his owner. Have you ever seen or heard about animal abuse? And again, that kind of, there was a student who was like, oh, well, does it have to be animal abuse? You know, what about like a human? And I was like, you know, I kind of got a little bit, oh no, like, okay, you know, and this is in front of the whole class. But it turned out, you know, that the child just shared like, oh, my mom and I were walking and we saw a parent or a mom yelling at her kid. And then we heard them go in the house and we heard a loud slap. And, you know, we talked about that, like, wow, you know, and the kids start, you know, other kids start joining in the conversation and sharing like, well, that's not okay. I would have told mom something, or, you know, and then we talked, well, is that really what you want to do? And so it was just a good time for them to open up and even share when somebody else is having an experience, they get to share as well. Okay, so whenever we get started, I do let them know, and I do make it optional. You can share if you want to. You don't have to share. What I have noticed is that it's very helpful when you type the question in the chat, and so I kind of did a little screenshot right there. A lot of the majority of the students will respond if they can type it in the chat. There are some, you know, a good handful that will talk on video, or, you know, sometimes they'll at least talk on audio, not showing their face. And but I think it's really helpful for you to use the chat. And then I always make sure, like, when they type their answer in the chat, I read through, and then I would say like, oh, Dave, I noticed that you said, you know, this, you know, or I think yesterday my question was for them to choose, like, is it sunrise, twilight, night, you know, what part of day would you pick and why? And so if someone put sunrise, I would be like, oh, Dave, you put sunrise. Why did you choose sunrise? And they can reply in the chat or audio, or turn it on to video. I never, you know, tell them, no, turn your video on, or, you know, it's up to them. Again, you know, going over those guidelines, making sure all students are listening to the student, and they know, they're like, oh, do we mute ourselves? You know, yes, please mute yourself, you know. And then also don't forget to share your answer. So whatever question you ask, and sometimes, like, if no one's answering, they're kind of thinking about it, I'll share first. Like, okay, you know, let me give you guys some time to think. Let me share first. Or sometimes I share at the end, or if there's kind of like a pause, I'll share, and then while other kids are thinking. And so you always want to be a part of that circle and share your answer too. And I think we can go to the next one. Okay, and then here's where we kind of mix in the second step. So based on their responses, sometimes, you know, we'll respond using those strategies that we have learned from second step. You know, it sounds like you were experiencing some really strong emotions. You know, what could you have done? And we kind of like guide themselves. And sometimes the other students, you know, they kind of like to add, you know, like, yeah, you shouldn't have done this, or you should think about that, or let's see. Oh, I have done where I did have a student who kind of responded. I think it might have been the Shiloh, and that kind of, you know, turned from animal abuse to kind of another type of, you know, and so a student shared like, oh yeah, I was walking and this kid, he kept like yelling this thing at me, and I think it was actually a gang-related slogan that was being yelled at him. And he's like, and I just got tired of it. And I went and I pushed him. And I was like, you know, so he started going off into this story. And I was like, okay, you know, I said, I don't know if that was like the right choice. So I want you to think about, I'm going to give you some time to think and think about maybe a better and more positive way you could have reacted, or what could you have done that wouldn't be aggressive or violent. And I was like, so we're going to go to someone else and let her share. And I'm going to come back to you and I want you to tell me what you thought about. You know, so again, you know, that's kind of where we mix in our second step, you know, and that's just as needed, you know, whenever we come up to something like that, because the kids are, they are welcome to share whatever they want. And sometimes it does take a turn for the, and we're like, well, you know, we also had an assembly from Kaiser. It was like the Kaiser, it was Thought, Breathe, Choose. So they like to, you know, also it seems very check and set, and, you know, so the kids were mad to like, what's a better choice, you know, and so it's very helpful. And then we're ready for that. All right.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. It was nice to hear about how you're interacting with the kids online. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manita, for sharing that. And one of the things that I wanted to say also is for those circle questions in Mission Control under PD resources on our social and emotional page, there is a restorative practices link. And I also included that great website, Medita, you shared on a doc in there. So that's where you can get more resources for restorative circles and questions.
Okay.
So next up, we'll go ahead and move over to Caitlin Boudreau, who's going to be sharing what she's been doing with her students in the classroom. So Caitlin, why don't you go ahead? Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
So my name is Caitlin Boudreau. I am a third grade teacher at Haycox, and during this time of distance learning, I'm realizing that it's important that we're continuing to build those relationships, since I kind of feel like we're starting the school year over with this distance learning. So I've been making it a point every week to make sure that we're practicing those SEL skills that we learned in second step, and that I'm checking in on them regularly. So today I'm going to be covering some of the Seesaw check-ins that I do, and how I am using Google Meet to practice SEL skills with my students. So there are 3 types of check-ins that I do with my students on Seesaw. One of the ones is the feelings check-in, and this is just asking them how they're feeling that day. Another thing that I like to do is the sentence frame, I wish my teacher knew, and I get lots of valuable information out of that. Sometimes I'll just have them plug an emoji with how they're feeling for the day, and they have the option to explain or not to explain. But I've found that these feelings check-ins are really helpful when I do my weekly phone calls with my students, because sometimes I call and I just get those one-word answers. So if I have notes, or I can look on Seesaw of how they were feeling this week, that creates a talking point for a student to open up to me about how they were feeling. And I really like this one down here. One of my students was feeling so happy because we got to do our Google Meet for the first time, and I got many responses like that. That made me realize that the student interactions that they have between each other are really important during this time. And another type of check-in that I've been doing a distance learning check-in every Friday. And this has provided me with lots of valuable information to guide my instruction, to differentiate my instruction, and gives different students different assignments. I asked them how difficult the work was, something that they enjoyed about the week, what was the hardest part of the week, asking them if they have books at home. That has been a challenge during this time. So thankfully they all have their internet now, so they can get on all of those websites with a multitude of books. Last Friday's questions, I asked if they had a quiet place to work at home, and I was so sad to find that many of them do not have that quiet place, and many of them have to go out on their porch or go to the bathroom to have a quiet place to work. So that just really gives you perspective into what our students are dealing with at home. And another important question that I think we should all ask is if our students have anyone to help them at home. And I found that many of my students do not have anyone to help them at home, or that even speak English to help them read their work each day. So this kind of helps me to see into the perspective of my students at home and really decide what I want to assign them and provide them a little bit more leeway when it comes to participation each week. Okay, so this is one that I started this week, and it's a positive affirmations check-in. So we wrote these positive affirmations at the beginning of the year together, and we've tweaked them ever since. And we read these every day together after recess. So I've been having them do this one this week, and they've really enjoyed it. And just reading these to themselves really helps them to practice that positive thinking and self-confidence within themselves. And so they record themselves reading, which is reading practice, and they don't even know it. And then I ask them how they felt after they read those affirmations, and all of them have positive feelings right after. If you go on Google, there are plenty of positive affirmations that your students can read, or you can make it an assignment to create some with your class, and they really love to have some input into this. And another type of check-in that I do is a mindfulness check-in. We did mindful breathing every day as well after recess. So I wanted to continue that process, especially during this time of uncertainty. I know that we need to remind ourselves to take a moment to breathe. So giving the students the opportunity to have this moment is so important during this time. And the brilliant Jeannie Lycia created these choice boards. And if you haven't checked out her training, the Seesaw Collab-o-rama from last week, she created these choice boards in Seesaw. And this is a mindfulness one that she created and gave me permission to share with all of you. The link is there. So the students really get to choose which mindfulness activity they would like to do. And then the most important piece is reflecting on how they felt afterwards. And this helps them to cope during this difficult time. There are also many other mindful breathing exercises on Go Noodle and YouTube. So there are many resources out there already for us to use. Okay, so every Friday at noon, we do a Fun Friday Google Meet with all of my class. It's optional, but I found that I get so much participation on this day. And this is strictly a time to just check in with students, to play fun games like Kahoot, and really just have the chance to talk to each other and for them to see all of their friends. That's the most special part. So I wanted to plug this in just to show you a really easy way. I was nervous about my students getting on Google Meet, but now I think every grade level can do it. If you go to your Google Classroom, I'm not even using Google Classroom, I'm using all Seesaw, but I do use Google Classroom for this Google Meet link. So if you copy and paste that into Seesaw, I post it to all of their journals about 10 minutes before we meet, and then I record myself reading these instructions, and I also write them. So all they have to do is click that link. The toughest part is logging in with their Google username and password, but as far as I know, they only have to do that once and they will not have to do it again. And then they click join meeting and they are already in there and ready to go. So this is one that we did last week. I created a mindful scavenger hunt that appealed to the senses and appealed to their feelings, and they really enjoyed this. And this is a great time for them to practice their listening and their speaking, and they really love this time to share. So here is the link to the mindful scavenger hunt that I created. Feel free to use it. And last week, this is when I asked them to go get a living thing to share with the class. So what I do is I set a timer for 1 minute, they come back, and then they raise their hand if they would like to share. So I got to meet many of their pets last week, and one student showed me a plant. So that was really fun. And the kids love to share with each other. And it's so funny how my shyest students are so excited to raise their hand and share something that they have in their home. Okay, and this is the Kahoots that we do. So whoever wins the Kahoot from the prior week gets to choose the Kahoot for the upcoming week. That's a new thing that we started, and the students absolutely love to play Kahoot. The great thing is right now you have it in Kahoot, so you could play live, or you can assign the Kahoot to the students to play at their own pace. We like to play live. I think it makes it a lot more exciting. So there are so many SEL Kahoots available and that are already made that you can just assign out to your students. So this is one with feelings that I want to try with them, just a way for them to practice identifying feelings. And during this time, we actually have Kahoot Premium for free due to coronavirus. And the Kahoot Premium, I haven't had much time to play with it, but you can actually play with, I think, up to 1,000 players, it said. So if you wanted to play with a whole grade level, you could do so. Sometimes I invite siblings to join in on our Kahoots because they're sitting there right next to my students and ready to have some fun. Also, there are open-ended questions that are available with Kahoot Premium and word cloud polls, which I'm thinking of doing next week, asking all of the students how they feel. They plug it in, and I think that would be a great way for them to connect to each other. And here are some other ideas that I just wanted to put out there for you guys. One thing that we can all try for practicing those social emotional learning skills is a compliment circle, assigning a student a partner and having them share out a compliment on the Google Meet. And that helps them practice turn taking and kindness with each other. Then I found this kindness challenge just on Google. The link is there. So I think this would be another thing to challenge our kids to do, even if they're at home. I think this would be really fun for them. And finally, like I said before, they love to show and tell. So even if it's everyone bring one item to the Google Meet today to show and share with the class.
Okay, thank you so much, Caitlin. That was wonderful. One question with in regards to Seesaw, and we all know that you're a big Seesaw user because you have presented at TST on Seesaw, but question, are your activities that you just shared for Seesaw, did you share them to the district library that is on Seesaw?
I have not yet, but I can definitely do that.
Okay, so everybody, there'll be two places you can find it. Caitlin will put them in the Seesaw District Library, or the links are on this slideshow, which will be posted in HESD Mission Control. Back to you, Dave Castellano.
Very good. Well, thank you for all those great ideas. It's wonderful to see all the students having a variety of ways to share, engage, and for you to get to know them. Next up, we have Atenea Benitez from Blackstock, who will be sharing and talking about some of the activities she's been doing with her junior high students. And from the slide, Atenea, the microphone is yours.
So I am Atenea Benitez and I teach at Blackstock Junior High. I'm going to talk to you guys about how I'm using mindfulness in the classroom, some reflective journals, self-management skills, and building connections. I just want to let you know that I do teach 6th grade, but all of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing can be used with any grade. The first thing I wanted to share with all of you is this chart that has really helped me understand social emotional learning. In the past, before we started this whole social emotional learning, I had a conversation with someone and this person was like, well, do you know what social emotional learning is? And me, I'm like, yeah, you know, it's about emotions and kids sharing it, and counselors do it a lot. And this person was like, well, you do it a lot in the classroom as well. And I was not able to understand that until I saw this chart, which has really helped me. And I wanted to share with all of you. So based on this chart, social emotional has some categories to it, which is self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. But the cool thing about it is that it tells us, and it shows all of us teachers that we are already doing this in our classroom. We are not having to reinvent the wheel because we are already using it. And I hope if you want, you can share this with anybody else and you can see that you're already using this even in distance learning as well. So the first thing I do in my classroom that I used to do in the past when I was with the students as well is a mindful minute. The students would arrive to my classroom and we would do, right when they would sit down, we would do a minute of mindfulness. And while they were doing this, I would explain to them, I know some of you are going through hard stuff at home, leave that out the door. We are here in our classroom, we're here to learn, we're safe, we're in a safe environment. And I was happy that I'm able to use this whenever we start our Google Meet. It's a daily routine established, and it's just 1 minute long. The video literally just plays a bell, and the students have to close their eyes. And once the students close their eyes, they have to hear the bell. And once the bell stops, they can open their eyes. So this is something I start my Google Meets with every day. And it also brings them a sense of connection between back in the day when we were all in the classroom. Something I am really loving during Google Meet, I do the self-reflecting journals. I like self-reflecting journals because the students get to reflect on their behaviors, on how they're doing. And this one, I asked about how do they feel about distance learning and learning at home, and what was something that they were struggling with. And I'm going to read what it says. The student said, I think learning from home is harder than learning at school. At school, teachers explain what we have to do. In online schooling, it is confusing. At school, friends were the only distraction, and here online schooling, there are so many other distractions like phones, consoles, basketball, and etc. Those distractions made me unfocused and lose determination at schoolwork. I've been lately slacking off and asked my mom if she could help me because I haven't been determined to do schoolwork, so she decreased the amount of time I can play games. I love how this journal, just a simple paragraph, helped this student understand that he was slacking off in school and that he needed to kind of jump back into the school mode. And he also came up with a solution as to how he would address the problem that he was having. So on Google Classroom, which is what we use, I tend to just a daily question. Every day they do this assignment and the students respond to it. Also very important is that I provide feedback to the students. Just a quick awesome job, or oh, I can't believe you're going through that, we'll work with it together, or anything like that helps. Also, these topics help me because if I see that some of the students are saying that the work is really hard and they need more help with it, I am able to provide that help that they need. I can maybe schedule another Google Meet. I can maybe record another video for the students to understand it better. And it's also a great writing assignment. Okay. So part of self-management is for the students to be able to manage their time. And in middle school, the students do not really have this sense, some of them, because we have the schedule for them. We have bells that ring for them, and they're used to the schedule, but they just don't know how to create one. So I created a little template for the students to be able to create their own schedule at home. This schedule helps them and myself, because if I see the student is not doing the work for Miss Wilson's class, we go over the schedule and we see, oh, well, why aren't you have that time period to do it? Why aren't you doing it? Or are we sure that time period is okay? Do we want to move the schedule? So the schedule is kind of like a live document that we can keep moving and changing so that the students feel comfortable with their schedule. And this is an example of one of the students' schedule. And this goal setting activity, I love that the students can make a goal for the week for themselves. It brings them a sense of accomplishment when they achieve the goal. So I do this every week. Every week, Monday, the students have a goal that they set for themselves. And a lot of them have been, I want to turn in all my work on time. But this activity is super cool because it tells them, how do you know when you have reached your goal? How are you going to work toward this goal? What behaviors or actions can help you successfully reach your goal? Again, self-management, self-reflection is being here. Are your settings, how are you setting the goal? Why? Why do you feel this goal is valuable? And sometimes the students don't understand some of these questions and they just come up to me on Google Meet and they're like, Ms. Benitez, can you help me? And we kind of talk about it. And I'm like, see, you know it. It's just your own words. I don't have to tell you, you know it. So I really like that. And I have the link for that as well. So responsible decision-making, students are used to rules, classroom procedures. And when we decided to go into distance learning online, there was a big, broad thing where it's like, well, how are they going to act? Are they going to be professional with it? Some of our students were not professional with it in the classroom. So how can I help them understand that this is still a classroom environment? in the first week, I had students writing as if they were texting. So since it was on a computer, they wanted to put emojis in the middle of a paragraph, and they wanted to write you instead of the whole word YOU. So I came up with these Google Classroom etiquette and then Google Meet etiquette, and they're just rules and expectations for when we're in Google Meet, and there's some Google expectations and rules from we're on Google Classroom, and they love when I put my Bitmoji on anything. So that's why now I put it on everything that I do. And some of these are like mute yourself, which some of those adults need help with that as well when we're starting. Headphones, participation, ask for help, chat responsibly, be smart online. And I did not just want them to look at this and it be kind of like a bulletin board in the classroom where, oh, it's there, but who cares? So I created this an assignment, and on Google Forms, I made it like a little quiz. And so that the students had to read this and had to know the rules and do the quiz. And that showed kind of responsibility of them going through all of this. And of course, in Google Meet, I went over it with them, and it's really helping, especially the be on time part has really helped me, because in the beginning they weren't on time, and now they understand what time being on time is. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is building connections. We are seeing our students, meeting with them on Google Meet, but I think it's very important to build connections with parents, because the parents are on the other side of us and they can help us, because we are a great team together, parent and teacher. So these are some apps that are being used. I personally use Remind, but I just heard about talking points through a 6th grade teacher, Graciela Bautista, and they like using talking points because it is like Remind, but it translates what you write to Spanish. And you just write it in Spanish, in English, and it translates it, sends it out to the parent, translate it, and the parent can respond in Spanish, and you'll get the message translated in English. So I think that's pretty cool. Personally, I know Spanish, but I know a lot of teachers are using this, and it has other languages too. It's not just Spanish. I think it has over 100 languages. And I like to make phone calls every week. I do have about 58 students. So I call 30 one week and then 30 the other week. But when I start the conversation with parents, let's say I'm going to talk to the parent about the student not turning in the work, I don't go into the conversation saying, do you know your student's not turning in the work? Because that's not a positive conversation that I want to have with the parent. I go into it asking, oh, how's your student doing? Are you having any internet connections? Are you having any technology problems? And once they say, oh, no, we're good, I bring up the, oh, well, it's interesting. He's missing a couple of assignments, and I was quite concerned about it. So that's kind of how I start my conversations. Also, I like to call parents to let them know that their student is doing amazing during distance learning. So on Fridays, I call and I let them know, oh, your student turned in all the work. I just want to thank you, and I just want to thank the student. And I think that helps with the connections and parents coming up to me or calling me with positive interactions. Okay. And that is all.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Right. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. You got a lot of great kudos on the comment sections. 2 questions. Someone noticed that you had those mindful minute videos, and the question was, are there more where those came from, or was that just one video that exists? Is there a series of?
No, I found them on YouTube, and I just put mindful minute, and they do have like 2 minutes, but there are quite a lot on YouTube that are short, and mindful minute and mindful 2 minutes.
Okay. And then also, love the Google Classroom etiquette with the emojis. Noticing that there's screenshots on the slides. Is it possible to add to the slides before they're posted links to the actual document if people want to use that to cut or make their own copies?
I can do that.
So your public has spoken. They love that document. The other thing is, a teacher reminded us that they're loving the talkingpoints.org. This person uses Remind and says that it also has a translator and really recommends it as well. Okay, so, and that's it.
Okay, very good. Well, you know, I want to thank all of our presenters for sharing. I think we covered a lot of different practices that we can do, whether it's the community circles, building connections through Seesaw, as well as the mindfulness activities and expectations. And I think, you know, as we think back to Maslow's before Bloom's and making sure that our students are connected, we know we miss them and they miss each other, and what great opportunities that we learned today on how we can continue to build those connections with our students. So I want to thank our presenters, Mirita, Caitlin, Atenea. Thank you very much for sharing your great strategies today.
Have a happy Mother's Day to all, to you if you're a mother, or to your moms, and look forward to seeing you online next week.